Greetings, everyone. Today's video is about global conquest, and it is a deep dive analysis into the semifinals and the ranking of the 16 teams that made it to the semifinals for Globe 4. Before we start, there was actually a very recent update as I was planning and prepping for this video that is about global conquest that reduces the number of preliminary rounds from 5 to 3. This is good and bad news, mostly good because most people end up getting global conquest fatigue. And so this will prevent that and it will allow the frequency to go up. One disadvantage of this might be that it is now more dependent on who you get in your matching as to whether you will qualify or not. Here you can see who qualified in the Globe 4 semifinals. Here are the 16 teams. So this video is going to do some deep analysis into trying to figure out who is going to win this, who has the best chance, who has the strengths, and we're going to look into some of the sequence of matching who has the strongest strength, as well as how to analyze this. So even if you're not in Globe 4, you can still benefit from watching this video and come up with some conclusion and some strategy for yourselves. So let's get started. So this is the first table in my analysis where I've listed all the worlds and their season points and their global conquest points, but I've added in some very relevant information about which are merged nations and which are not. So here I've listed the merged nations, who were the merging nations that formed them and when they were formed. And notice that I added the 17th nation, which is we're going to talk about because it's an interesting scenario. They went through a merge and almost made it, but they didn't qualify. What's interesting is that there is exactly 8 nations that made it to the semifinals that did not get a merger, and there is 8 nations that made it that did get a merger. Now, mind you, there was 2 other nations, Nation 299 and Nation 301, that actually got mergers, but their merger was too late in the process. It was on January 7th, so close to the end of the preliminaries. So they did not qualify because, but it is good to keep in mind that they didn't qualify. Most likely merged nations clearly have an advantage in global conquest, but they didn't because their merger didn't happen in time. One more thing to notice here is that in purple, worlds 286 and 292 actually had the duel of dominance event. So they actually have, or some of them actually have the badges. So they might have a slight advantage. However, I think it is small and should not play into the final rankings significantly. In the right column, I've listed, where each of these nations, if they made it to the semifinals last season and how they did. Another quick point, Globe 4 is from server or world 262 through 348. So it is one more observation that it is not surprising that most of the nations that actually made to the semifinals are in the low numbers because they are older worlds. In fact, I was curious and wanted to say, let's look at how did each of these semifinalists, what was their strength of schedule? So I did one more analysis that actually looked at each of their opponents and looked at the opponent's average ending rank. So almost like a college football or a college basketball or a Seat 16 type setup to look at strength of schedule or the average strength of the opponent. So that's where this table came into play, where I've calculated the average strength of all of the opponents that each of these 16 or 17 teams faced. So you can see here that there's actually good parity around this. So I was initially leading to a conclusion that, maybe Camel does a great job of matching, but really this is a skewed data set because these are the ones that qualified and they had a potentially easier route to get there. So as you can see, most of them got between the 40 to 50 um, um, ranking. There's total of about 77 teams here, so you can see they're towards the bottom 1/3 of that ranking system. And of course, the one that didn't qualify, World 263, which is a very interesting world because they got a merger, but they didn't get a merger soon enough. And not only that, but they got a merger with two worlds that were actually from Globe 3. So they are a very strong nation. And I am, being in 285, I am kind of lucky and happy that they didn't make it, because if they did, I think they would have won it all. Okay, so you may ask, how did I come up with this strength of schedule, or the average opponent rank? It took a good bit of work. So I went into each of these and looked at their opponents, and then found where their opponent ended up. So here you can see that World 309 lost only once, and they lost to 263, which is the world that didn't qualify. Similarly, World 274 also lost once, and they also lost to 263. So both 309, very strong world. Oops, pardon me. And 274, also a merged world. Their only two defeats were at the hand of 263. So in this table here, I've listed each of the five results of the preliminaries and looked at the average rank. So each of the yellow columns is their rank, where they ended up. Some of these obviously went through mergers and they stopped in the middle, so I tried to exclude some of that. But here you can see that's how we came up with this ranking system. So it's you go into each of the worlds, you find out who they played with, and then do a comparison as to where the eventual opponent ended up ranking in the final preliminary ranking. The next set of research that I did, and I really like this one because it gives you a good idea into the actual strength of these worlds in terms of city level and troop level and just troop count. So unlike Void, Global Conquest really is heavily dependent on how many troops and how strong your troops are and how many cities and the tiers of troops. As you've seen from mines or battles yourself, it's very hard to compete with, no matter how strong your T10s are, it's very hard to compete with T11s. And similarly with those T11s, it's hard to compete with T12s. There's not that many T12s in these worlds, but there are some monster players, which we have another table for. Here, I wanted to kind of just do a calculation to say, let's go into each of these worlds, look at the city levels, and assume that everybody that has a C34 has T11. So if you look at this analysis, and this is where I came to the conclusion that I was happy 263 didn't make it, because if you look at that bottom row, they have over 90 cities that have T11 or higher troops potentially, and that would be extremely hard to compete with. And it's understandable, 263 merged with 222 and another Globe 3 world, and I think they did a strategic, either it was lucky, so it's unfathomable that 263 lost Chaos Land or won Chaos Land fairly. So it is possible that this was a strategic and brilliant move in terms of those worlds to get the Globe 3 into the Globe 4 dynamics and dominate. So understandably, you can see by just this, the sheer number of T11 accounts, they really benefited for those extra months of playing, and they would truly dominate it. And it was clear because they beat two of the strongest nations already that made it to the semifinals, 309 and 274. Here I showed the total world BP. Now, mind you, this data is either January 9th, 10th, or 11th data, so it may be a little bit dated. Next, I wanted to look at the top alliance BP, because the top alliance BP is extremely important for Global Conquest. Almost as important is also what's your backup alliances. So the top 3 BP of alliances is also very relevant. So highlighted in green, you can see 273, 293, and 309 have very high BP in their top alliances. And then as well as the top 3 alliances have pretty high BP. So this is understandable because these are merged worlds. And we're going to stop looking at 263 because they're not a semifinalist, but you can also clearly see there that they also have an advantage in the top 3 as well. The last column I wanted to show is relevant because it really highlights that limitation that I was referring to of 250 cities that can enter into the battle. So, here you can see that 285, our world is extremely well aligned in terms of, yep, the BP, the total nation BP is the lowest amongst all these, but you can see that the top three BP, top three alliance BP is almost 90% of that total BP. So it is a good streamlining uh, method here. And it does make sense to focus on that top three because um, you may have, number 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way through 10 alliances that may have a lot of BP, but they can't participate in the battle, so they don't really go into that um, um, metric. So global BP or the world BP is less important than the top three, in my opinion. So the takeaways from here is that, from a T11 perspective, clearly the merged worlds have, a huge advantage as well as, Alliance BP perspective. However, you can look at World 285 and 286, and they've done a good job of streamlining and getting that top three Alliance BP in. And in fact, 286 is even more interesting, is that they've streamlined it very well into top two. In this next table, we wanted to look at identifying the monster players and looking at the strength of each nation's top players. So we looked at the top 10 BP players and took the average in millions. We looked at the top 10 officer strength of the server and took an average. And then we really wanted to look at, what about the combination of what's a monster player? Because a monster player is one that not only has the troop and the officer strengths, but can actually combine and use them. So I used 75 million BP. That means there's multiple fleets, and then 7.5 million officers. So there was a lot of people that almost made it to the monster category, but I just tried to use a cutoff. So here you can see that this is a situation that actually where 286, even though it's an unmerged nation, has two monsters, and they are, one of them is actually mid range, which is Seal, and that is what led to their high ranking in my final ranking, as well as their high performance. So the strength of 286, even though it's an unmerged nation, it competes with the merged nations because of those two monsters. And you can see here that their top 10 average player BP is actually competing with the merged nations. So no surprise, the merged nations have more candidates, and so their average strength is higher, their average BP is higher, but 286 is an outlier. Here you can see that, this is really a differentiating factor between merged and unmerged nations. And, as you can see, 263 in the next season will dominate, because you can see there that they have the highest officer strength of all these semifinalists. So, taking all these factors into consideration, here is my ranking that I came up with. And here you can see there's no surprise that the merged nations are higher ranked and expected to do better than the unmerged nations, with the exception of 286, because of those monster factors that I talked about. And how I did this ranking is I looked at the relative, looked at the T11s, looked at the officer strength, looked at the alignment of the alliances. How well are they aligned? How well are they working together? But all of these factors are all dependent on, the matching. So it all depends on what type of matching each of these nations get, and how lucky or unlucky you are in the matching. And of course, how well the leadership is and how well that the alliances band together. How there's a lot of strategy involved in, which player plays which round. Do you focus on only two? Do you split your forces and focus on all three? Do you focus on the center? Do you focus on the energy sources? A lot of strategy involved, and a lot of leadership involved in terms of the planning, the organization, as well as the execution of timed attacks, speed attacks, when to attack what. So this is, one of the most interesting aspects of the game. I haven't experienced Duel of Dominance. This is, I've heard great things about that event too. It's a shame that, it's not being released to more worlds simultaneously. Um, but Global Conquest is quickly a fun event and a really nice event if you're one of the nations that is lucky enough to actually make it and do well. It's no fun losing. So the next analysis that I wanted to do is look at why did only these nations do it, and it's no surprise that the lower ranked nations did it. But let's look at some of the numbers. So here in this table, the data doesn't lie. You can clearly see here I just took basically in groups of about 10 to 11, and I excluded some of the worlds that merged, pretty early in the global conquest, and so basically got a very low rank because they merged and didn't participate any further. So here you can see in this ranking that this is the average rank of the worlds in ascending order, and it becomes very apparent that um, if you're a world that is a older world, you fare much better in global conquest because you've had more time. The whole world has had more time to develop compared to if you're a newer world. So this is actually makes it really tough for the in the globe system for those that join the servers later in that world. They have a huge disadvantage in this event. So, but here is now an opportunity. So if you are thinking of resetting, that is something that you actually need to keep in mind, that when you are going to reset, pay close attention to that globe and don't join a globe towards the end of it. Try to join that globe towards the beginning of it. Okay, so here I just wanted to illustrate what that means. So that means that, okay, globe 7 is in its starting process. It started at world 523 and it's continuing to go at 559. Now you have to be careful about entering into this globe because there's already been 26 worlds. You're still okay to join this now, but you don't want to be towards that back end of that globe because you're going to face those severe disadvantages in these cross nation events. So when you're planning, if you really want to plan it well, wait for globe 7 to finish, wait for globe 8 to start, and then try to get in on that organized fashion in globe 8 starting, and you will have a huge advantage in global conquest as well as all other cross nation events. To further illustrate, you can actually go into your stats station, click on global conquest, and you can actually see the results of other globes here at the bottom in more globes. And here you can see that, okay, globe 5 had their first season, and amongst worlds 349 to 435, it looks like it is 349 that actually won it all. You can also see that globe 1 and 2 actually have a combined global conquest because they had so many mergers that there isn't enough opponents in each globe. So they have a combined global conquest. And you can click on these globes and actually look at the history and see who won. Here you can see there's different, here's the four, you can see the four nations that actually, went into the finals. And then if you click on the bottom in more seasons, you can see the results for each of those seasons. So Globe 1 and 2 have had 3 seasons. Globe 3 has had 3 seasons. We are on our second season, and then I think Globe 5 just finished their first season. Globe 6 has not gotten yet, but hopefully you guys will get it soon. I'll leave you with some random tips. Make sure that you set an alliance schedule, and then remember the server times for Global Conquest Round 1 is server time 2, Round 2 is 10, and then server Round 3 is 18. So 2, 10, 18. Also, the instructions are fairly good that talks about, the minimum level being 22, the maximum points being 45, but there actually isn't. The point system is you can only see when you click inside and click one of the buildings and then you list it. So use this point system if you don't have it. I also have a table that I'll link as well. Also, a good reminder is if you look in the individual rewards, in order to max out, you need about 1.5 million points to get the max merit and extension components. And then you can see these tiers. This is also not readily available until you're actually in the menu while it's active. So keep that in mind. Try to get to that 1.5 million individual points. Keep in mind that individual points does not add to your nation points, so you should still focus on trying to get maximizing that nation point and then focusing on individual. Also, if you're having heavily contested battles in the middle, you're probably not going to have a problem getting that 1.5 million points as long as you're high level enough. Finally, I wanted to leave you with a taste of what a thrilling semifinal battle can look like. So this is actually from last season, um, where we lost, but we had the misfortune of facing 273 and 293, two immensely strong alliances. And I wanted to just show this clip for those of you that haven't experienced it to get a sense for what it looks like. Here you can see it's a clear lag fest, just trying to get the speeds and getting in, and you have massive battles in the core. It is a lot of fun. In this particular sequence, I think um, we tried to speed attack and take the core, and you can see there's a big battle that ensues immediately after we finish. I think so. Here you can see it's 84 going against, and you'll notice that quickly, very many times that the game just basically goes crazy. So this is a recording from last season, not this one. Um, so here we're attacking the Bat Alliance that actually survived and is still there in post merger, and so that's just a taste of global conquest. I hope this analysis has proved useful to everyone. I've used publicly available information from just the globe rankings, and I look forward to battling with all of you, and hope you have a wonderful end to the semifinals, and good luck to everyone that can make it to the finals. I hope we don't encounter two strong worlds, and we can make it to the finals, but I've ranked myself that we don't make it to the finals. Good luck, everyone. Thanks for watching. Um, please let me know if I've missed something, and if you disagree with my ranking or analysis, please do leave a comment. Here is the speed attack that is essentially just taking it right back from us, and you can see the game is just going haywire. So one of the hardest thing to deal with is the lag, and so good luck with the lag. That's your biggest opponent.